The galaxy had the most advanced technology ever made. Ships that could bend light. Engines that run on plasma that is hotter than dying stars. Computers that help you find your way are figuring out 1,000,000 routes every second. And they were all going to die. Not because of a war. Not from a foe. From a cosmic collapse. A storm of electromagnetic energy spread through the galaxy like rust through iron, killing every advanced drive, digital sensor, and plasma core it touched. One ship after another went dark. Fleets floated. The station stopped working. A rusty, old Earth freighter that a scrapyard dealer sold for $7 because no one wanted it was the only thing that stood between millions of lives and total darkness. There was only one human mechanic named Ray Cole. Ray didn't own a fleet. He didn't have any money. He had grease on his hands, a box of old blueprints from Earth, and one idea: that the rest of the galaxy had forgotten the most important thing humans ever learned. When complicated things fail, simple things stay. This is the story of how a $7 scrap ship saved the whole galaxy. And how one normal guy showed that grit and grease last longer than any extinction. The scrapyard on Veckan Station smelled like burnt metal and lost dreams. That IT was 3 miles long in every direction and was full of ships that had failed, broken down, been left behind, or become so old that their owners threw them away without a second thought. Freighters from other worlds with broken plasma cores. Military ships with broken navigation systems. The insides of luxury cruisers melted. All of it rusting in the dim orange light of the station's fake sky. Ray Cole walked through it alone, stepping on broken circuit boards and glass that had been broken, with a damaged scanning tablet under his arm. That he was 34 years old. Not too tall. Always a little dirty from the last engine he had been inside. There were oil stains on his jacket that had been there for so long that they were almost part of the fabric. His eyes were calm in a way that didn't come from being sure of himself but from having been in enough bad situations that panic stopped being useful. He had been a freelance mechanic on Veckan Station for 6 years. Fixing other people's plasma regulators, drive calibrations, and digital engine systems that cost more than a house but broke like cheap toys. That he was sick of fixing things that weren't meant to last. That he had heard the first reports 3 weeks ago. Scientists on the outer rim called it the Vaxis collapse. It was a slow electromagnetic storm of unknown origin that was moving inward at a rate of 40 light-years per month. It didn't kill any planets. It didn't kill people right away. But it broke electronics. Any system that uses plasma drives, digital computers, or electromagnetic sensors would stop working as soon as the wave passed through. The scientists said it would take 60 days to get to the inner systems. A lot of people didn't believe it. Or they believed it but thought that someone like a government, a business, or a fleet command would fix it. They kept flying their plasma ships and thinking that something that advanced would have an advanced answer. Ray had read all the reports. And what he understood that most people didn't was that the Vaxis collapse didn't just kill plasma drives. It killed everything that needed electromagnetic fields to live. All of the engines on modern ships. Every one of them. Not one type. Combustion inside. Engines that work on old Earth. Pistons, cylinders, fuel, and a spark. Force that is purely mechanical and doesn't depend on electricity. They were so good at chemistry and physics that no cosmic storm could hurt them. For more than 200 years, no one had made a combustion engine for a spaceship. The technology was only found in old records from Earth, museums, and the memories of mechanics who were interested in history. Ray had been learning about it his whole life. Not because he thought he would need it. Simply because he loved it. And now he had to have it. He stopped in front of a ship that was buried under a pile of cargo containers that had fallen over. A freighter from Earth. This is an old Helios-class cargo ship that is about 210 years old. It is 60 feet long, wide, and built like a brick. No smooth alien curves or fancy plasma vents. There were only flat panels, thick iron-reinforced hull plates, and the bones of an engine bay that used to hold a V12 combustion block. A previous owner ripped it out and tried to install a plasma drive, but it burned itself to slag. Ray put his hand flat against the hull plating that he could feel the quality even through the dirt. Making things on old Earth. Thick, forged iron alloy panels that had been left alone for 200 years and were still in good shape. Modern alien ships had thin composite shells that were designed to be as light as possible and to work well with plasma. Faster, lighter, and more beautiful. But this thing was built like a tank. He saw the dealer from the scrapyard, a short alien with 4 arms named Bricks who wore 3 pairs of glasses. He was sitting in a messy booth near the entrance eating something that looked very bad. Ray said, "That Earth hauler in Section 7. What do you want for it?" Bricks looked at a tablet that was covered in grease. $7, which is the same as 7 Earth credits. Been here for 11 years. The engine is gone, the hull is bent, and the computers are dead. Take it. Ray paid with cash. He stood outside the booth and looked back at Section 7, where the old freighter was buried under junk and no one could see at $7 that he'd spent more than that on coffee this morning. He took out a worn notebook with real paper and a real pen and wrote at the top of a blank page, "Mechanical Heart is the name of the project." After that he began making a list of everything he would need. Ray sat in his small workshop that night, surrounded by old engineering books from Earth. Real books with real paper pages. About 200 years old. 3 manuals for V12 engines, 2 guides for fuel systems, and a full textbook on combustion physics that I bought from a museum that was closing down. The idea was easy to understand. Combustion engines worked by lighting fuel inside a sealed cylinder, which pushed a piston and turned a crankshaft, making mechanical energy in the form of rotation. No electronics needed at the core level. No plasma, no electromagnetic fields, and no digital management. Just chemistry. Just physics. The hard part was making it big enough to move a 60-foot freighter through space. Ray drew all night, with his coffee getting cold next to him and doing math problems in the margins of his notebook. At 3 in the morning he had something that looked like it might work. Not in a classy way. Not in a clean way. But maybe well enough that he shut the notebook and said to no one, "Okay. Let's see what you're made of." Marcus Webb, a friend of his, came by 2 days later. People trusted Marcus right away because he was 30, a structural engineer from Earth, tall and broad-shouldered, and had a smile that was easy to see. He walked around the freighter twice, knocked on the hull in a few places, looked at the engine bay that had been destroyed and then looked at Ray. "You paid $7 for this." "Yes." "To put a gas engine in it?" "That's right." "Because of the Vaxis collapse?" "Right." Marcus nodded slowly. "Okay." Ray smiled. "When do we start?" That was why Marcus was his buddy. Ray said, "We already started." The engine bay looked like a crime scene. The previous owner had taken out the original combustion system and put in an alien plasma drive instead. The plasma drive had gotten too hot and basically exploded from the inside out. This left a layer of crystallized plasma residue all over the bay, which Ray had to chip away with hand tools before he could see what was underneath. It took 3 days to clean it out. Marcus said on the second day, while scraping residue off the back bulkhead, "I've never seen a plasma core fail this badly." Ray said, "Because it wasn't made for this hull. The Helios frame is made to handle mechanical forces like vibration, torque, and compression. Plasma systems make electromagnetic pressure that the mounting points weren't made to handle. The person who put this in place was going against the ship's physics. And you will be working with the physics. That's the plan." Ray could see what they really had once the bay was clear. The mounting platform in the middle, which was made of heavy forged steel and built on Earth a long time ago, had almost no damage from the plasma explosion. The 4 main thrust channels that went to the back thruster ports were bent, but they could be fixed. The fuel routing channels along the hull were empty but in good shape. Ray ran his hand along the mounting platform and felt something move in his chest. Almost a recognition. It's like seeing the bones of something that has been buried under all the bad things that have happened to it. He said softly, "The bones are good." He stood up and looked around. He nodded after a while. "Yes, they are." Building the engine meant starting from scratch. No one made combustion engines anymore. Plasma, fusion cells, or electromagnetic induction powered everything on the market. Ray got his raw materials from the same junkyard. High-carbon steel from the wreckage of failed alien ships that were used to make structural support beams, hull bracing, and load-bearing internal frames. Most of it was made by aliens, but steel is still steel. And when tested, the composition of the alloy was close enough that he talked about physics with Marcus over dinner, and they were both surrounded by steel parts that were being machined at different stages. Ray said, "The Vaxis wave is electromagnetic. It messes up any system that relies on electromagnetic fields. Plasma drives work by using magnets to hold superheated plasma in place. This plasma is completely electromagnetic and very fragile. Digital computers use electromagnetic signals which disappear when the wave hits. But combustion is different," Marcus said. "Combustion is a part of chemistry. Fire is made up of fuel, oxygen, and a spark. Fire is made up of expansion and force. Technically, the spark involves electrical ignition, but I'm using a magneto-ignition system. An all-mechanical spark generator that makes ignition voltage by spinning without needing any outside electrical power. Fully self-sufficient. The wave will hit this ship and go right through it, but the engine will keep running." Marcus was quiet for a while. "Ray, if this works, I know. Nobody has this. This is not on any other ship in the galaxy." "I know." Ray looked at the steel parts on the table. "Then we should make sure we don't mess it up. The most difficult part was making the pistons that it was necessary to machine each piston to within a few millimeters. The cylinder lost compression if it was too loose. The piston got stuck because it was too tight. The engine wouldn't start either way." Ray spent almost all of the 3 days at his lathe. His hands hurt. His eyes felt like they were full of dirt. He drank coffee that had already cooled down. Marcus worked on the cylinder block by welding together 12 cylinder housings in the right V shape from heavy steel plate, machining the bores and making the crankshaft journal mounts. Very hard physical work. He had small burns all over his arms from welding sparks by the end of each day. The pieces that came off the machines, on the other hand, were very pretty. Not shiny like modern parts, but heavy, dull, and solid. Only something made by hand can be this precise. Each part got the special care of the person who made it. On the 4th day, Ray put the first piston into its cylinder bore, and it slid in with the right amount of resistance that he held it up to the light to see if it fit. Great that he carefully put it down and didn't say anything for a long time. "1 down, 11 to go," he said. They had 20 days before the Vaxis collapse was supposed to hit the inner systems. Ray knew this because he was always looking at the reports. Every few days, another outer system went quiet. Ships drifted, communications stopped, and stations ran on emergency backup that wouldn't last long. The tone of the scientific reports had changed from cautious worry to quiet alarm. Ray and Marcus worked for 16 hours every day. It took 8 days to put the engine block together. 12 cylinders. There are 12 pistons. The crankshaft is made from a single piece of structural steel. Connecting rods. Valve sets. Ray built the magneto-ignition system from scratch using his oldest manual and more patience than he had ever used before. They moved the engine block into the freighter's engine bay when it was done. It weighed 400 pounds and was on a rolling frame that they made themselves. It took 2 people most of the morning. But when Ray dropped the first mounting bolt through and tightened it, the ship looked different. It seemed like it had been waiting for this. Next came the fuel system. Old tanks in the lower hull are still there. New fuel lines were made and run through the hull channels to a carburetor that was built by hand. Then there was the exhaust system, which was the most creative part of the project. 12-cylinder exhaust ports come together through tapering steel headers into 4 main channels. Each channel ends in a machined nozzle at a thruster port. It wasn't pretty. The exhaust headers looked like the inside of a pipe organ that someone had too much coffee to make. Marcus looked at them and said, "That is the ugliest thing I've ever seen in an engine bay." Ray asked, "Does ugly matter right now?" Marcus thought about it. No, it really doesn't." The 17th day. 3 days before the planned arrival of Vaxis. There were new reports. Not just communications, but everything else in 2 more systems had gone dark. A rescue fleet sent to one of the affected systems had reached the edge of the Vaxis zone and stopped sending signals. No one knew if they were still alive. The collapse was happening faster than expected. Marcus walked into the engine bay and stood at the door without saying anything. Ray looked up from below the engine block. What? New report. They're changing the schedule. Not 3 days. They think it might take 36 hours. Ray put his wrench down. He stared at the engine. He thought about everything he still had to do. 36 hours, he said. Yes. Okay. He picked up the wrench again. Then we don't sleep. They stayed up all night to work. The station around them was getting more and more tense. The normal sounds of Veccan Station, like the hum of ships coming and going and the sound of docking clamps and cargo loaders, were getting quieter. People were leaving ships to try to get to a safer place, but no one knew where that was. The lights in the repair bay flickered at 4 in the morning. They both looked up. The lights stopped moving. That's not normal, Marcus said. No, Ray said as he looked at the clock. It's too early. You think? I don't know. Ray looked at the engine. How long do we need? Marcus thought about it quickly. Bleeding the coolant system is necessary. The fuel lines need to be tested for pressure one last time. You have to set the ignition timing by hand. Maybe 2 hours. Ray stood up and said, we might have less than that. Begin with the coolant. I'll take care of the fuel lines. They stopped talking and got to work. The lights went out an hour and 15 minutes later. Not flickered. Went out. Totally. The hum of the station's plasma generators, which had been a constant in their lives for years, stopped. The sound of it stopping was almost real. A silence that came on so quickly and completely that Ray's ears rang. Then the backup lights came on. Red dim. Putting everything in the color of old blood. Marcus got up from the coolant reservoir, still with wet hands, and looked at Ray across the engine bay. Marcus said, it's here, straight face. Yes, Ray said. They could hear the beginning of something terrible outside the thick walls. A distant groan, like something huge settling. Ships losing power. Systems breaking down. The station itself started to die slowly as every plasma-dependent system went dark. One thing left. Timing of the ignition. Ray picked up his timing light, which is a manual, non-electronic tool based on a design from a book that came out 200 years ago. Then he walked to the front of the engine block. His hands were steady. He would think about how steady his hands were at that moment later. Not because he wasn't scared. Yes, he was. But right now, fear had no other place to go but into the work. He set the time by hand. Moving the crankshaft to position 1. Aligning the flywheel's marks with the reference point that was cut into the block. Moving the magneto around until it was in the right spot. Are you ready? Marcus asked. Get to the cockpit, Ray told them. Leftmost lever for manual throttle. Hey, I'll call you on the radio. He held up the battery-powered radio they had been using. Push it to 40% when I say go. Marcus grabbed the radio and left. Ray was next to the engine. It was a manual start. There was a heavy hand crank at the front that turned the flywheel until the engine started. He held onto the crank handle. The sounds of the station's death were getting louder outside. As the systems that ran them broke down, alarms in the distance stopped ringing. A ship that couldn't control itself crashed into a dock somewhere far away. Ray took a deep breath. He turned the crank. Nothing, again. And again. The flywheel turned, but it was heavy and hard to move in the cold. He swung 6, 7, and 8 times, putting his whole body into each stroke. The bay smelled like fuel and metal. The engine caught on the 11th stroke. Not smoothly. It fired, stumbled, almost died, and then caught fire again with a sound that hadn't been heard in this part of the galaxy in 100 years. A loud, rough, mechanical roar came from the pistons firing in sequence, the crankshaft spinning, and the whole heavy assembly coming to life with a violence that was almost shocking. Ray's boots made the floor shake. He took the radio. Go. 4 out of 10. As it loaded up and found its rhythm, the engine's voice got deeper, harder, and steadier. The heat made the exhaust headers start to glow a little. It looked like the ship itself was moving, as if it had taken a breath. Ray stood in the middle of the engine bay and listened that he had never heard anything more beautiful in his life. Ray ran to the front of the plane. No screens. Not a computer. No screens that show pictures. There were only mechanical gauges, a bench seat for two big manual windows covered by a patched canopy, and a control panel with physical levers and cable-actuated controls. There is a battery-powered emergency light over the panel. But the needles on the machine were moving. And below them, through the floor, the seats, and every other part of the ship, the engine was running. It was a steady, strong, physical pulse that felt more alive than anything else. Ray had been on a ship powered by plasma. Doors on the hull? Ray said, "I'm going to sit down," and did. "Already pulled the manual release," Marcus said. Bay doors opening on the counterweight system. The huge repair bay doors moved slowly, thanks to old counterweights that worked on nothing but gravity and a cable. This principle was 200 years old and still worked perfectly. The doors led to the main docking corridor at Veckan Station, and what they saw made both of them stop. The hallway was dark except for some red emergency lights that were on. They could see the outside docking ring through it, through the docking ports and view panels beyond. Full of ships that are dead. A lot of them. Freighters from other planets, military ships, and passenger ships all sat still, dark, and quiet. Ships that were cutting-edge technology an hour ago were now just 300 tons of metal that didn't move. "What the hell?" Marcus said in a low voice. Ray said, "Don't look at it." Not in a cruel way. Strongly. "Look at the hallway. Take us out." Carefully, Marcus pushed the throttle forward. The engine got louder, the ship shook with torque, and the old freighter started to move. The docking corridor was 60 feet wide and the ship was 60 feet long, so there wasn't much room to spare. Marcus flew it by looking out the window, keeping both hands on the controls, making small adjustments to the course, and concentrating hard. Ray said, "Tight on the left." "I see it." "Correction. 3 feet to the right." "Clear." The outer bay doors were stuck halfway open because of the power failure, but that was enough for them to get out into space. Ray had never been in a place where the space outside Veckan Station was so quiet that it felt wrong. The debris field was already forming. Ships that were on their way when the wave hit were now slowly tumbling on their last paths, unable to change them. A passenger ship 3 miles from the station was spinning on its long axis and was completely dark. 2 dark military patrol ships crashed into each other and locked together. The Vaxis wave was also visible. It looked like a faint rainbow at the edges of the normal darkness, but it wasn't stars. The wave had come and gone. And everything that could go wrong had gone wrong. Other than the ship that Ray and Marcus were on, without a second thought, the old Helios freighter sped through it. The engine didn't care about magnetic fields. The magneto made its own spark. The fuel system was made up of only mechanical parts. The levers and cables moved the control surfaces. The wave hit the ship and went right through it. The engine kept running. Ray checked his mechanical fuel pressure gauge. Steady, gauge for engine temperature. Normal. Indicator of thrust vector. In the middle. Navigation? Marcus asked. No computer. Just star charts. Ray took a rolled-up paper chart out from under the panel and laid it out on his knees. Old way. Marcus gave him a look. Then he almost laughed, letting out a short breath that was part disbelief and part something close to joy. He said again, "Old way. Go to the Cashin beacon. Mechanical beacon, clockwork radio, has been on the air since before plasma drives were made. It will still work." Ray pointed to the chart. Climb 30 degrees at 270. Marcus changed his course. They flew through the field of debris for the first 40 minutes. No computer, no automated sensors, and no system to avoid collisions. Marcus looked out the window and through the repaired canopy for dead ships that were falling apart. He used his hands to fix them, using thrusters that were set up to respond exactly to stick input. It was a lot of work. Work that made your arms tired and your eyes dry because you didn't blink enough. But the ship did something. Every input caused an immediate physical reaction. The stick, the thrusters, and the ship all moved. A direct connection. There is nothing between the hand and the result. Pleasure yacht from another world at 11 o'clock. Turning. Ray said. Nose through our path in about 20 seconds. See it? Marcus counted as he watched. Going down. He pushed on, dropped the nose, and the freighter dove under the yacht's slow tumble with 8 feet to spare. A military ship the size of a football field sat still in front of them, blocking their path on both sides because it was so wide. Marcus took them over it, close enough to see the hull markings and that the emergency hatches had been blown from the inside. People were leaving. Moving in suits. We should, Marcus began. Ray said, we can't carry them all. The words hurt. We need to get to the Cashin beacon and tell them what we have. That's how we can help the most people. Marcus didn't say much. But he kept on flying. The space opened up past the debris field, and the full extent of the disaster became clear. Ray's eyes fell on a ship that was dead. There were hundreds of them in every direction and at every distance. The running lights in the inner sector that had always made this part of space look like a city of stars were just gone. It was dark where it had been bright. No traffic where there used to be a lot of it. How many people are on those boats? Marcus said. Don't, Ray said. Marcus kept his eyes on the road. The engine worked. Steady, hard, and not worried about disaster. The Cashin beacon was in the right place. A small station, more like a big buoy, is set up at the point where 2 small star systems' gravity is balanced. Constructed more than 300 years ago through early human-alien collaboration. It runs on clockwork and simple radio mechanics, with no plasma, digital, or electromagnetic dependencies other than basic radio wave transmission. Still on the air. The only thing that can be seen from 100 light-minutes away. And it wasn't empty. When Ray and Marcus got there, 3 ships were already there. One was a very old cargo ship that carried people and goods. It was almost as old as Ray's freighter and ran on a diesel-electric hybrid that an old woman named Vera Chen had kept up for 40 years out of love and stubbornness. The second was a small alien research ship that had survived because it was in the middle of an engine-off drift experiment when the Vaxis wave hit. Its crew was able to restart it using a backup mechanical emergency drive that had been required by an old safety code that had since been repealed. The third was a huge alien military transport 200 feet long and the size of a battleship, that was moving under its own power. Moving but slowly and unevenly with visible effort. Ray quickly got the alien engineer on the phone. She said her name was Tyrus and spoke quickly with a little breathlessness, and with the energy of someone who had just done something that scared and amazed her at the same time. Tyrus said, we had an old museum display engine on board. A piece of Earth technology that our admiral brought back as a souvenir. A 6-cylinder combustion block that doesn't work at all and is just for show. It took us 4 hours to get it working again. It shouldn't work. But it's working. Ray shut his eyes for a moment. Then, it works because it was made to work. Not because it was made to look good. There's a difference. They were at the Cashin beacon for 8 hours. Ray took full advantage of every minute that he had brought his books. His book. A full, sealed case of machining specifications, including every measurement, tolerance, material specification, and assembly note he made while building it. He told everyone about it. Over the radio, through sketches sent through the beacon's old analog fax system, and through docking ports where engineers from other ships crowded around him with notebooks and pens. Vera Chen knew things that Ray didn't, like how to make changes to the fuel system that she had learned over the course of 40 years of keeping her old hauler running. For 2 hours, she and Ray sat on the deck of the beacon's small common area, sharing what they knew with each other like 2 people who had found each other at just the right time. Tyrus came through the docking port with 3 of her engineers and spent those 2 hours taking in as much information as they could, asking pointed questions, and already drawing up plans to adapt combustion principles to ships that are 3 times the size of Ray's freighter. During those 8 hours, more ships came. There are 6 of them, and they all survived by using some form of old technology or mechanical backup. Every one brought more engineers, more brains, and more questions. Ray answered all of the questions. Marcus found him sitting alone at the beacon's observation window near the end of the 8th hour. He was looking out at the dark space full of dead ships. Marcus was next to him. Marcus said, "You're thinking about all of them." "Yeah. We can't save them all. Not today." "I know." Ray looked out into the dark. "But we can make the tools. And we can show the people who will use them how to use them. And finally, eventually becomes enough. Ray nodded. Marcus put his elbows on his knees. Do you know what the best part of all this is? What no one saw coming. What's going on? It wasn't hard. The whole galaxy kept making things more complicated, more advanced, and more reliant on different levels of technology. We were saved by something as simple as putting fire in a box and pointing it in a certain direction. He shook his head. I've been told that simpler is worse my whole career. That you shouldn't use it if it's not the newest thing. Ray said, complexity is helpful until the thing it's complex about breaks down. Then all that complicated stuff is just extra weight. Marcus was silent. What's next for us? Ray turned to a new page in his notebook. He wrote the fleet at the top. Ray said, we go back to the junkyard. And we do this again. As often as we need to. Ray and Marcus came back to Veccan Station 3 days after leaving the Cashin Beacon. Now the station was different. Not quiet in a peaceful way. Hollow silence. The plasma generators are still dark. Emergency power keeps life support systems running and lights dim. Most of the ships in the docking ring were still. But people were on the move. That was the only thing that was different. The paralysis of the first few hours after the wave had passed was gone, replaced by a strong, practical, and stubborn will to live. People are working. Doing repairs by hand. Taking out circuit panels and putting in new ones with wire and switches. Setting up manual overrides for systems that were made for computers. When the elegant solution stops working, engineers always do the same thing. They reach for the ugly solution that still works. Ray walked through and watched it. He felt something in his chest that he couldn't put his finger on for a while. Pride. Not in himself. In the act itself. Because people won't stop. They stopped at the door to the main docking bay. They could see teams of engineers, both human and alien, in coveralls and pressure suits moving around the hulls of 3 dead freighters through the observation windows. The lighting was portable and battery-powered. Getting to work. Who put that together? Marcus said. A voice behind them said, Tyrus. Verachin was standing there with her white hair short and neat and her hands in her jacket pockets. Small and very calm, like someone who has seen a lot of things. She got on the emergency radio as soon as she got to the dock. Started asking for engineers. She said she had the plans. A little smile. She said a mechanic gave them to her. Ray looked out at the teams working on the ships that were dead. That he said, they'll need parts that have been machined. It will take time. Yes, Vera said. It will. Pause. I was told my ship was out of date for 40 years. Do you know how many times it broke down in that time? How many? Twice, and I fixed it both times in less than a day. Everyone else's ship never broke down, but it did. And then they couldn't fix it at all. She looked out at the teams of engineers. The lesson was always there. People just didn't want to learn it. Ray's workshop turned into a factory. Machining tools that are always on. Ray was on the lathe. Marcus was on the mill. And Tyrus was working the forge. Tyrus had docked her repaired transport and brought 3 engineers to help. Vera going back and forth between them, checking the quality by sight and touch. Parts for 6 engines. Pistons, crankshafts, valve parts, magneto-ignition systems and exhaust headers. The scrapyard gave us the raw material. Bricks, who had gone from mildly amused to very interested, gave Ray unlimited access and started picking out materials himself. He made a handwritten list of the best steel parts because his tablet was dead like everything else. More engineers showed up. On the second day, an alien mechanical engineer named Goro came by and looked at Ray's setup for 20 minutes without saying anything. Then, without asking, he sat down and started making work that was as good as Ray's within an hour. 15 years ago, he had studied the history of combustion on Earth as a theoretical exercise and never thought it would be useful. Ray told him to work on the cylinder heads. On the 3rd day, a young woman named Dana came. The 19-year-old apprentice mechanic had been watching the project from a distance for days before finally pushing through the door to the workshop. Is there anything I can do to help? She asked. Ray gave her a set of measuring tools and a manual. Begin with piston rings. She was quick and accurate. By the end of her first day she was keeping up with the rest of them. Ray said to her during a break, "You're good at this." She said, "I'm scared." Not a complaint. A note. Ray said, "Yeah. Most of the best work gets done when you're scared and you keep going." She turned the piston ring she had been working on in her hands and looked at it. "Do you really think we can save all those ships?" Ray thought about the truth. "I think we can save more than we could before. And tomorrow even more than today." She nodded and got back to work. Ray got a call on the radio from outside the station on the fourth day. There were 112 people on board a diplomatic ship that was in trouble. When the Vaxis wave hit, it was on its way and running on a small mechanical backup drive that a forward-thinking engineer had insisted on adding, even though the ship's designers didn't want it to. It couldn't dock on its own because it was moving slowly and only partially powered. Its docking computer was broken, and the manual maneuvering thrusters were only working at half power. Ray left his shop and went to the docking area. 2 hours. Ray had never been more focused at work than when he was in the docking control room with Tyrus and 2 supervisors. With no computers or automated systems. They communicated by radio and hand signals through windows, and Ray talked the pilot of the diplomatic vessel through a completely manual docking approach using only verbal instructions and the pilot's own eyes and hands. The pilot did a good job. Even though they were tired, they were patient and precise. He followed all the directions and made all the corrections without going too far. The ship came in slowly and carefully, and when it locked into the docking port, Ray felt and heard a loud clank through the whole station. There were 112 people who walked through the docking port. Ray stood in the hallway and watched them come through. They were all alive, but they were also tired, shaken, and scared. He felt the full weight of what they had almost been and what they still were. He didn't talk to any of them. There was nothing that could be put into words. He just stood there and let them come through alive, letting that mean what it meant. 3 weeks after the Vaxis collapse, Veccan Station had 6 ships in service. 6. Out of the hundreds in the docking ring and the thousands in the space around it. But 6 ships running in a sector that had been completely without power was the start of something. Ray put them together into what he called the First Fleet, though this was not an official name. Every ship had at least one engineer who knew how to fix combustion systems. This was important because a mechanical system was useless if it broke down and no one knew how to fix it. Every ship had a full set of spare parts and a printed copy of Ray's engine specifications. The First Fleet's job was to search for and find things. Going out to dead ships, getting on board, checking their condition. Bringing back survivors and figuring out which ships could be fixed. They discovered people who were still alive in places where they shouldn't have been. Emergency sealed rooms. Pressurized parts that somehow kept the air inside. Life pods that had automatically opened before the wave hit. Each one was a small miracle of mechanical backup systems that an engineer from long ago had insisted on adding, probably arguing with higher-ups the same way Ray had argued with anyone who questioned the combustion project. There was never enough space for them. They went out, filled to the brim, came back, moved survivors, and then went out again. Tiring, boring, but necessary. Dana turned out to be a natural at flying. Before the collapse, she had never been in a spaceship. She had been watching Marcus for 2 days. Then Marcus let her take the controls in open space to get a feel for it, and she did it with an instinct that surprised everyone, even her. By the 3rd week, she was flying solo recovery runs in a second ship that the workshop had gotten running. It was an old mining hauler that worked great once a new combustion block was put in. She flew it like she had done it all her life. Goro was not only good at machining but also at making changes to engines on the fly. He figured out how to fit combustion systems into engine bays that weren't meant for them and made parts work together that weren't meant to work together. Ray and he got along well at work even though they didn't talk much. They had a lot of respect for each other and spoke the same language when it came to measurements and materials. Vera spent most of her time in the workshop. She said she was too old to do rescue missions. But she was there every day, and the parts that came off her part of the workbench were always the best in the store. Ray got the call he'd been waiting for and dreading on day 24. A signal from Earth came through the emergency radio network, which was slowly spreading out from the Cashin beacon as stations with working mechanical radios came back online and started relaying. Earth had been hit like everyone else. But Earth was where combustion technology was invented. There were enough historians, engineers who had studied old technology, and museum curators who had kept old engines running as artifacts that recovery had started faster there than almost anywhere else. Earth was sending out signals. Not just a signal. A constant stream of compressed data packets that can be received by any working mechanical radio system and contains a full library. Every design for a combustion engine that has ever been made. All kinds of fuel systems. Every historical record of mechanical engineering, from the earliest designs for internal combustion engines to the most advanced Earth technology before plasma. All of it. No charge. Sent to everyone who could get it. Ray sat in front of the radio receiver for a long time, not downloading anything, just listening to the signal itself. It was the steady, reliable carrier wave of a mechanical radio transmitter reaching across hundreds of light years through a galaxy that had gone dark. He thought about how many people had needed that knowledge to already exist and how long it had taken to build it, not knowing that the galaxy would one day need it like air. He then began to download. After 6 months, Vecon Station looked like itself again. Not quite like itself. The plasma generators were still dark. No one knew if they would ever come back or if a solution would be found. That question was for scientists and physicists who were working on it. But the station was still going strong. There were ships in the docking ring again, but they weren't sleek alien plasma ships. They were a different kind of fleet. Freighters that have been changed to have mechanical engines. Rebuilt trucks. Some of the new designs were made from scratch using a mix of old Earth blueprints and alien engineering principles. They weren't very pretty, but they worked and worked and worked without stopping. Ray's workshop had grown from a single room with a lathe and milling machine to an 8-room building with 6 machining stations, a proper forge room, a testing bay, and a classroom. The classroom was where the lessons took place. Every day there were 2 sessions that anyone could attend. Most of the time Ray taught the classes himself. Goro sometimes took one. Vera sometimes. Dana had begun to teach the basics of piloting, doing it in a straightforward way that showed she had learned by doing and thought it was the best way. Everyone was a student. Engineers of all ages. People and aliens. People who had worked with plasma technology for a long time and had to start over from scratch. People who had never studied engineering before but now knew that knowing how to use your tools was important for staying alive. Ray had stopped counting how many people had come into the classroom. It didn't seem like the right number to keep track of anymore. One afternoon, Ray walked through the docking ring by himself and stopped at a viewing port to look out over the area where ships docked on the outside. There are 8 ships in sight from here. All of them are powered. Moving in and out, running the shipping lanes that the sector needed to work, bringing in food, medical supplies, people, and other goods. All 8 of them run on mechanical combustion. Tyrus discovered him there. She was always at the station, and her converted transport was basically a permanent part of it. She fit in with the workshop staff as if she'd always been there. She stood next to him and stared at the boats. She said, "I counted 37 ships that were working in the area yesterday." Ray said, 41 today. 3 more haulers came in from the outer rim, and someone got them running using the Earth broadcast. Tyrus nodded. "Do you think it will be enough?" Ray thought about all the ships that were still out there. The hundreds of thousands of them. The work that would take a long time. He said, "I think we have enough to keep going. And that's what enough means right now." Tyrus looked at the ships. "Do you know what I've been thinking about?" "What?" "That engine that looks nice. On the ship of the Admiral. This whole beautiful, crazy accident." She shook her head. "It shouldn't have been there. Nobody thought it was important. And it was the only thing that could help us." Ray gave her a look. "It wasn't an accident." "What do you mean?" "The person who put that engine on the ship knew what it was. He knew what it meant. He put it there because he cared about it. He thought it was worth keeping. Ray turned around and looked at the ships. People who care about things keep them going. And when everything else fails, the things that are kept alive are sometimes the only things that matter. For a moment, Tyrus was quiet. Your ship cost $7, she said. Ray agreed. My ship for $7. That night he went back to the workshop. Dana was in charge of the evening class, which had 23 students. Her voice came through the open door, clear and to the point, talking about piston ring clearances in the same way she talked about everything else. Goro was at the forge, working on a modified cylinder head geometry he'd been designing for a week. It would make the engine more efficient when it started up in the cold. He hadn't told anyone what it was because he wasn't sure it would work. Ray had learned that this was Goro's way of showing respect for an idea until he knew it was worth sharing. Vera was at her workbench, hand machining a crankshaft journal. She moved through it slowly and carefully, as if speed had long since stopped being important to her. Ray took a seat at his own bench. He opened up his notebook. Almost full now, pages full of calculations, sketches, specifications, notes, and changes that have built up over 6 months of building, teaching, and solving problems by hand. He flipped to the last blank page. He wrote at the top, "What we found out." Then he wrote for a while. Not for any one reader. Because it seemed like it was important to say it somewhere. When complicated things go wrong, simple things stay. The more a system needs everything to work perfectly, the more it fails when one thing goes wrong. There is a layer of technology between a person and a result that can fail. The last line is the human hand on the wrench. It should never be the line that is forgotten. Grease and grit are not less than elegance. They are not the same as elegance. Elegance is for times when you have a lot. Grit is what you need when you need it. A civilization that can only work when there is enough is not ready for the universe. We weren't anything special. We were just willing to do what the job needed us to do. And that was all. He shut the notebook. The workshop buzzed around him. There were machines, voices, the forge, and people doing work who knew what they were doing and why it was important. Outside, 41 ships slowly moved through a sector, refusing to die. The mechanical heart kept beating in the engine bay of a 60-foot Earth freighter that cost $7. The galaxy had the most advanced technology that anyone had ever thought of. And when it broke down completely, the only thing that saved it was a rusty old freighter that no one wanted. A mechanic who still worked with his hands bought it for $7. Not because old is always better. Not because progress is bad. But a civilization can become so dependent on complexity that it forgets the most important truth of all. The basics are always useful. 200,000 years ago, combustion happened. Air, fire, pressure, and movement. That's all. And when everything that was fancy, advanced, and stylish went dark, the fire kept burning. Ray Cole didn't save the galaxy because he was smart. He saved it because he listened to what other people didn't. He kept things alive that other people let die. He did the work that other people thought was too low for them. And when the time came, the exact horrible time when nothing else worked, he had the tool. He knew what to do. He had the hands. So the lesson isn't about cars. It's not about plasma or combustion. This is the lesson. Always remember the basics. Don't ever think that the old way doesn't have anything new to teach. Don't confuse strength with complexity. A skill that works when everything else has failed is the most powerful thing you can have. Know how to use your tools. Understand the basics. Don't think that what got you here will always get you through. The universe doesn't care how smart you are. It only cares if you can keep going.